We obviously paid them very well and so forth and so on. I think that the cultural issues ultimately have been addressed, but there was a period of time where there were, because of the freewheeling nature of the company, there were an awful lot of internal distribution lists which had nothing to do with the company.
What does that mean?
They were distribution lists on topics of war, peace, politics, so forth.
What's a distribution list?
A distribution is like an email. Think of it as a message board.
Okay.
Roughly speaking, think of it as message boards for employees. And I remember that at one point somebody discovered that there were 100,000 such message boards. And the company ultimately cleaned that up because companies are not like universities, and that there are, in fact, all sorts of laws about what you can say and what you cannot say and so forth. And so, for example, the majority of the employees were Democrats in the American political system. And I made a point, even though I'm a Democrat, to try to protect the small number of Republicans because I thought they had a right to be employees too. So you have to be very careful in a corporation to establish what does speech mean within the corporation. And what you are hearing as wokeism can be understood as what are the appropriate topics on work time in a work venue should you be discussing. My own view is stick to the business, and then please feel free to go to the bar, scream your views, talk to everybody. I'm a strong believer in free speech, but within the corporation, let's just stick to the corporation and its goals.
Because I was hearing these stories about, I think in more recent times, in the last year or two, of people coming to work just for the free breakfast, protesting outside that morning, coming back into the building for lunch.
As best I can tell, that's all been cleaned up.
I did also hear that it had been cleaned up, because I think it was addressed in a very high conviction way, which meant that it was seen to. How do you think about competition? For everyone that's building something, how much should we be focusing on our competition?
I strongly recommend not focusing on competition and instead focusing on building a product that no one else has. And you say, well, how can you do that without knowing the competition? Well, if you study the competition, you're wasting your time. Try to solve the problem in a new way and do it in a way where the customers are delighted. Running Google, we seldom looked at what our competitors were doing. What we did, we spent an awful lot of time is what is possible for us to do? What can we actually do from our current situation? And sort of the running ahead of everybody turns out to be really important.
What about deadlines?
Well, Larry established the principle of OKRs, which were objectives and key results. And every quarter, Larry would actually write down all the metrics, and he was tough. And he would say that if you got to 70% of my numbers, that was good. And then we would grade based on, are you above the 70% or are you below the 70%? And it was harsh, and it worked. You have to measure to get things done in a big corporation. Otherwise, everyone kind of looks good, makes all sorts of claims, feels good about themselves, but it doesn't have an impact.
What about business plans? Should we be writing business plans as founders?
Google wrote a business plan. It was run by a fellow named Salar, and I saw it years later, and it was actually correct. And I told Salar that this is probably the only business plan ever written for a corporation that was actually correct in hindsight. So what I prefer to do, and this is how I teach it at Stanford, is try to figure out what the world looks like in 5 years, and then try to figure out what you're going to do in 1 year, and then do it, right? So if you can basically say, this is the direction, these are the things we're going to achieve within 1 year, and then run against that as hard goals, not simple goals, but hard goals, then you'll get there. And the general rule, at least in a consumer business, is if you can get an audience of 10 or 100 million people, you can make lots of money, right? So if you give me any business that has no revenue and 100 million people, I can find a way to monetize that with advertising and sponsorships and donations and so forth and so on. Focus on getting the user right, and everything else will follow. The Google phrase is focus on the user and everything else is handled.
Sergey and Larry, you work with them for
20 years,
many decades, 2 decades. What made them special?
Frankly, raw IQ. They were just smarter than everybody else.
Really?
Yeah. And in Sergey's case, his father was a very brilliant Russian mathematician. His mother was also highly technical. His family is all very technical. And he was clever. He's a clever mathematician. Larry, a different personality, but similar. So an example would be that Larry and I are in his office and we're writing on the whiteboard a long list about what we're going to do. And he says, look, we're going to do this and this. And I said, okay, I agree with you. I don't agree with you. We make this very long list.